Hello everybody, and welcome to this showcase session hosted by ITU, which is going to be focusing on 5G implementation in non-EU countries of Europe. Now, quite often, I think when we talk about European spectrum policy, we do kind of refer to EU countries and EU policy. But as we in the UK have learned, obviously there's much broader than that in Europe, and there's the different kind of implementation of 5G in countries outside EU, which obviously is hugely important as well. So we're delighted to have this showcase session, which is going to be looking specifically at that. And it's our honor to have with us today a speaker who's going to be giving us a presentation specifically on that. A speaker from ITU is Jaroslav Ponda, who is head of the EU office for ITU. So Jaroslav, welcome. It's fantastic to have you with us, and we're really looking forward to your presentation. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much for this introduction, and good morning, good afternoon to all colleagues. Today, what we would like to do is to draw attention to this, what is happening outside of the EU. ITU, as the specialized agency for the ICTs, is very much dedicated to supporting the rollout of the emerging technologies. And in our sense, maybe 5G, IMT 2020 is not anymore emerging technologies because it's just happening, but it presents a lot of potential for accelerating the sustainable development goals agreed by all countries all over the world. Next slide. So this is the reason why we are working hand in hand with so many stakeholders to make sure that the 5G is not only the technology, but it's also the solution for solving particular challenges of the world. But this can happen only in the situation when this technology will be rolled out at the equal level in all countries. Next slide. This is the reason why we are working as the ITU with 193 member states, with the over 900 sector members and many academia members in order to see how to use strategically 5G. Next slide. As the ITU, as many of you know, and many of you, in fact, are familiarizing ITU in context of the 5G with the radio communication function of the ITU, but ITU is also the organization which is developing on the annual basis over 300 standards, and as of today, over 4,000 standards, technical standards are in use. In addition to this, ITU is the platform where we are interacting with all regulators and policymakers, facilitating spreading equitable and affordable access to telecommunications, making sure that its impact is meaningful for all countries. Next slide, please. Also in this context, we are having different work streams, and one of those is specifically targeting the support given to the rollout of the new technologies, including the 5G. We're monitoring at the global level the environment, regulatory environment related to the 5G, but we are also monitoring the rollout of the infrastructure in terms of the backbone, but also in terms of the investment in the infrastructure. We presented some time ago the special paper on the 5G, which is used by many countries as the reference point for developing their national strategies and the national action plans for the 5G, but also working hand in hand at the level of the study groups and taking a look how to solve particular challenges in different countries related to the 5G rollout. Next slide. In Europe itself, we're targeting 46 countries. And as already mentioned at the beginning, the infrastructure rollout is going on with the very diverse dynamics in the countries. I invite all of you to take a look at our just this year publication taking a look at these dynamics, digital trends in Europe 2021, is offering series of the reviews of the statistics and the time series, showing where we are heading towards, and ensuring that we are not only the leader at the global level in terms of the broadband race, but also that at the regional level we are a homogeneous region without any significant divides, and always the new technologies are the source of potential risks for having the new divides in the at the regional level. In particular, Regional Initiative 1, next slide, is targeting the infrastructure issues, and under this work stream, next slide, we are assisting the countries, we are rolling out the projects and providing series of different platforms to discuss spectrum and to discuss specifically 5G, to create the ecosystem for rollout of the 5G, like at the Baltics, in the Baltic Sea region, but also taking a look at the enabling environment and economics of the new technologies. Next slide. So therefore, before we are diving into the whole knowledge base presented on the 5G, I would like to invite all of you to join us on the 8th and 9th of March to take a look at the meaningful connectivity concept. Not only the challenge to be addressed by connecting people, but also taking a look how this connectivity is used in real terms and to create as impactful results as possible. And I encourage you to take a look already today at the two background documents made available for this meeting. Next slide. But let's take a closer look at the 5G in non-EU countries. The European Commission is doing excellent job with the observatory, monitoring each step of the countries in terms of the development and the dynamics of the enabling environment, spectrum, also implementation by the private sector, pilots through the EU observatory. We identified some gap in the non-EU countries where, in fact, there was no such a knowledge base existing, and this is the reason why we came up with the series of the 18 country profiles, 5G country profiles, which provide a good understanding for each country where the discussion and the strategy in which direction it goes and what potential it offers to the countries, but also to the stakeholders, putting a lot of hopes on the 5G. Next slide. So when you will take a look at each of the country profiles, you will see the background on the ICT, on the broadband and mobile telecommunication sectors data, but also the current progress on the 5G spectrum assignment and the challenge of the EMF, which is quite a hot topic in many of those countries and requires a special attention, and also taking a brief look at the commercial launches of the 5G. So let's take a look at the group of these countries. 18 countries is a lot of countries. It's not our intention to create a new group of the countries or new classification of the countries. Is just the group of the non-EU countries in our Europe region, covering 46 countries. When we are taking a look at the stats, we see that a very positive trend where the digital divide has been significantly reduced during the last years. In particular, in the last 10 years, we see that the connectivity to the internet became really was growing significantly. Next slide, please. Also, in terms of the broadband and the mobile broadband, many of you ask most probably about the non-EU countries, about the broadband. Will you mention, oh yes, those countries are making really big progress on the connectivity, but relying heavily on the mobile technologies. And this is true. And this, what we see on the slide, in fact, confirms this belief that many of those countries are putting a lot of emphasis on the mobile broadband, and that's why also during the last years we've seen significant growth in terms of the subscription of the mobile broadband to the mobile broadband services, but also significant growth of the traffic on the mobile broadband, which was almost tenfold, experienced a tenfold increase in the last 10 years. Next slide. Also in those countries, we see significant growth of the investment in the mobile technologies, in particular in 4G. 4G coverage in the non-EU countries have enabled additional 57 million people to enjoy the fast speed mobile connectivity over the past 5 years, showing how the large gap has been consistently reduced. This is positive trend because this paved the way towards the also introduction of the 5G, which is providing even more promising parameters for the end users, but more importantly also for the industry and the application in the other non-traditional sectors, which is the big hope for the digital transformation and acceleration of this process across the region. So let's take a look at the 5G consultations and the national strategies in those countries. We see that 12 countries out of the 18 have held already the 5G consultations. The 10 adopted ad hoc 5G strategies or incorporated 5G provisions in existing policy frameworks, and 7 allocated even the frequencies for the 5G. Next slide, please. And next. Yes, and the next one. So on this slide, you will see how the dynamics of the 5G is displayed in the non-EU countries with the full review of the national approaches. So we hope that with time we'll be also observing much more harmonization of the approaches and the implementation of the national plans. But let's take a look at the dynamics, for example, in the Western Balkans, which is a special region currently on its way towards the digital integration, with recent digital summit for Western Balkans agreeing on the strengthened cooperation between countries in this field. We see that in North Macedonia, the country has already freed up the 700 megahertz band and is proceeding with the auctioning for the 5G. In Serbia, the country has made both digital dividends 3 and will proceed to auctioning in the Q1 of 2021. And this has been shifted, unfortunately, from the original plans of the Q3, Q4 2020 due to the COVID. In Albania, there are no 5G specific regulations and strategies in place, as the government is focused on freeing the DD2 at the moment. And now developments by mid-2021 will enlighten on the future auctioning of the 5G. In Montenegro, EKIP is set up to launch the 5G roadmap with national strategies and goals by the end of 2020. And this will provide more information in the next auctioning due in 2021. And in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the country which just recently has launched the 4G, is currently accelerating the full implementation of this technology and taking the necessary steps to reduce the investment cycle. 5G tests are being carried out in the country with the big hope for even leapfrogging, but for the time being, the main focus remains with the 4G rollout. So let's take a look at the next slide, at the spectrum assignment for the 5G and the market development. In all countries, spectrum for 5G has been identified following the WRC 2019 outcomes and the CEPT decisions. International and regional organizations are playing a significant role in providing guidance on spectrum harmonization and continue acting as a reference point for the international community and the private sector stakeholders. With regards to the specific bands identified for the 5G, it is important to highlight that the 3.6 gigahertz band is being allocated for the 5G, or in some cases for general IMT, following the technology neutrality principle across almost the totality of the countries. In countries with the 5G auctions have not yet taken place, the 26 gigahertz and 700 megahertz bands are usually held back in terms of testing due to the risk of the interference. In fact, one of the challenges most commonly encountered in the implementation of the 5G is the process of freeing up the DD2 and repurposing spectrum from broadcasting services to IMT services. A process well underway within the EU, and that it is facing delays in many countries. COVID-19 has in most cases delayed significantly by a period of 6 months planned spectrum auctions. Next slide, please. And the next slide. But let's take a look at the some aspect of the 5G, which is a real challenge in many countries. The EMF still remains a challenge for the most of the countries, which take lines of approach with some transposing ICNIP and IEEE recommendation in low risk. Other prefer posing more restrictive limits in order of 10 to 100 times lower levels than recommended. And there are significant number of the countries which are currently struggling with this, what requires the public attention. So there is a lot of ongoing work currently, and taking a look at the way how to address these issues and not delaying the process of the 5G implementation. And many countries encountered during the COVID time also the national debates in this context, what will require maybe the proper actions at the regional level. Next slide, please. But why does the IMF matters? The ITU has prepared the background paper on implementing 5G for good in the context of the EMF. The paper which brought together the all knowledge, public knowledge, and from the all international organizations, but also including the knowledge proposed by the three sectors of the ITU from the perspective of the standardization, radio communication, but also on the development and the business modeling of this aspect of the 5G implementation. We encourage you to join this to take a look at this paper and to see how to also use the resources offered by the international organizations to navigate through the national debates. In addition to this, We have launched at the end of the year the regional assessment of on the EMF and the risk communication. This is something where several countries are still are being challenged significantly. And we hope that with the results of this study, we'll be able to provide much more targeted not only messaging but support to the countries and to resolve the national discussions around the EMF and to accelerate the 5G implementations. We have already quite good response quote, and we thank all administrations which provided and engaged in this activity. Next slide, please. And the next one. But let's take a look at the dynamics of the implementation of the 5G. 5G, even though we have seen quite big heterogeneity in the group of the 18 countries, took its own dynamics. A lot of the private sectors are already putting the 5G trials, not only targeting the end users, but also experimenting the 5G implementation in the different sectors in order to provide the additional business models for the 5G. Also, series of the different platforms have been created by the countries, like the digital roadmap for Liechtenstein has been created, which provided the platform for the all private stakeholders to engage and to brainstorm how the 5G could be used strategically. The same approach has been taken by the Turkish regulator, which with creation of the Turkish 5G forum attracted so many community, so many stakeholders, creating the community to really advance on the investment in the 5G, but also identifying the new avenues. Also, there were several regional moves observed. As you know, in the Nordic countries has decided to create work together on the creation of the 5G ecosystem for the Nordic countries, and on the annual basis, several stakeholders are reviewing their plans. The Nordic cooperation also launched the special program on this, and recently Western Balkans Digital Summit held in Tirana reiterated its commitment, offered the opportunity for the countries to reiterate their commitment to the cooperation on the 5G. So as we see, the implementation of the 5G across the region is quite vibrant, and there is a lot of potential for the private sector and the other stakeholders to be part of this and embark not only as the consumer, but also as those stakeholders who are driving the real innovation in the countries, offering as also the leapfrog in terms of the connectivity and the quality of the connectivity for the countries. And with the next slide, I wanted to thank you very much for your attention, and I'm remaining in your disposal for any additional questions.
Yaroslav, thank you so much for that, and it was a fascinating insight into to kind of national strategies and plans for 5G and broadband rollout in some of these countries, and looking at the stages that they're at with 5G implementation. I do have a couple of questions, if I may. So first of all, you mentioned in your presentation that there's a risk of kind of a widening gap between EU countries and some of the non-EU countries that were assessed as part of this study. Do you have any thoughts on what can maybe be done to accelerate 5G deployment in these countries and to stop that widening gap, or maybe even start to narrow that?
Yeah, thank you very much for this. So, as the international organization working on the daily basis with the ministries, policymakers, and the regulators, we always advocate for the sharing the good practices and trying to harmonize the approaches at the regional level. And the global level, of course, but our focus is at the taking a look at the regional level. As you will see in all those reviews on the 5G, we've noticed very diverse dynamics of and approaches towards the 5G as the technologies, and also the different timelines set by the countries. Taking a look at the 5G not only as the opportunity, but also at something what requires the investment at the country level. And this is quite important component which policymakers and the regulators need to take into account while designing the timeline also for the 5G implementation, making sure that this technology is paying off and is creating the revenues, not affecting the pricing and affordability at the country level. And having said this, this is very important aspect, in particular in the times of the COVID, where the populations are becoming so much dependent on the resilient infrastructure. In Europe, we are very happy to observe limited impact of the COVID in terms of the robustness of the internet. We didn't have much of the challenge in terms of the core infrastructure, but of course, the access and affordability remains a challenge at the countries, and in particular in those countries which are not developed economies. Many of them, in particular when we are going towards the south, these are the countries in transition, catching up, young economies, where the affordability is a challenge, and with the massive implementation of the 5G, of course, the prices might be going up, and this is something what in particular circumstances of the COVID would not be advantageous for the whole population, but also for the economy itself. So therefore, we are watching how those strategies are adapting. As I already mentioned, in many countries we have experienced delays due to the COVID, which gives a little bit of the time also to the stakeholders to redesign the investment plans and to repositioning in terms of the service provision during this increased demand for the digital goods and access to the internet. And this is something what we'll be supporting in the future. So we are working with several countries, providing direct assistance and contributing to their journey towards the launching of the 5G, or preparing the enabling environment that can make sure that the private sector can really embark on the 5G in the proper way.
Perfect, thank you, and that's great to hear about the work that you're doing and working with private sector in that way as well. And one other question, if I may. Just to kind of maybe talk a little bit more, or to get your thoughts a little bit more on how 5G in particular can be a critical component, how that can work to strengthen digital economies of some of these non-EU countries, and the role that specifically 5G can play in maybe helping to strengthen these digital economies of these countries in that way.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. So as we all know, the ICT sector is a significant contributor to the GDP of all those economies. I'm in particular talking about the countries in transition, where the ICT sector is the significant sector which generates the revenue, but also which engages several other sectors, so it's seen as the enabler for the digital transformation. This is something what we are taking taking a look very closely that we're not primarily focusing on the end user only. 5G and the IMT 2020 is the technology going much more beyond on the human being requirements, and a lot of new technologies empowered by the 5G might bring the good benefits not only to the humans but also to the driving the innovation in different sectors. And this is something where everybody is struggling with. We see that in all those countries the research houses are working patiently to find the solutions, and not only to be the consumer of the ready-to-go solutions, but also to contribute to the regional and the global market of the 5G rollout. So that's why we are very much passionately taking a look also at this aspect where the countries are trying to investigate how they could strategically use the 5G for something more going beyond the regular understanding of the use of the mobile technology by the humans. And there is a lot of potential with all parameters 5G is offering. So we are very positive on this.
Perfect, Yaroslav. Look, thank you so much. And I think that's a great way to end, to talk about the huge potential of 5G. And I think with the work that you guys are doing at ITU and others, I think, it's definitely a positive future. And we're looking forward to hopefully countries reaping the rewards of the potential of 5G very soon. So Yaroslav, thank you so much. As I said, that was a fascinating insight. I think maybe with my own admission, too much of this event was focusing specifically on the EU countries. So to have that focus on the other countries within Europe really was valuable. So appreciate your time, and thank you so much once again.
Thank you very much for inviting us, and we are looking forward to the future collaboration with you and also the whole community on the 5G.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.